down a tree with every blow. For Adora. For Dazelle. "My mother!" he screamed. "Burn you, my mother!" Abruptly, he realized he was hacking at bloody shapes on the ground. Growling, he made himself stop, shaking with the effort as much as with the pain in his side. There was less shouting now, fewer screams. Was anyone left but him? "Rally to me! Two Rivers to me! Two Rivers!" Someone shouted frantically, off through the damp woods, and then another. "Two Rivers!" Two. Only two? "Fail!" he cried. "Oh, light Fail!" A flicker of black flowing through the trees announced a Myrddraal before he could see it clearly. Snake-like black armor down its chest, inky cloak hanging undisturbed by its running. As it came closer, it slowed to a sinuous, assured walk. It knew he was hurt, knew him for easy meat. Its pale-faced, eyeless stare stabbed him with fear. "Fail," it said mockingly. Its voice made the name sound like burned leather crumbling. "Your Fail was delicious." Roaring, Perrin hurled himself at him. A black-bladed sword turned his first stroke, and his second, his third. The thing's slug-white face became fixed with concentration, but it moved like a viper, like lightning. For the moment, he had it on the defensive. For the moment. Blood trickled down his side. His side burned like a forge fire. He could not keep this up. And when his strength failed, that sword would find his heart. His foot slipped in the mud, churned up beneath his boots. The Fade's blade drew back. And a blurring sword half-severed the eyeless head, so it fell over on one shoulder in a fountain of black blood. Stabbing blindly, the Myrddraal staggered forward, stumbling, refusing to die completely, still instinctively trying to kill. Perrin scrambled out of its path, but his attention was all for the man coolly wiping his blade with a fistful of leaves. Ivan's color-shifting cloak hung down his back. "Elana sent me to find you. I almost didn't. The way you have been moving, but 70 horses do leave tracks." The dark, slender warder seemed as composed as if he were lighting his pipe before a fireplace. "The Trollocs are not linked to that." He indicated the Myrddraal with his sword. It had fallen, but still stabbed randomly. "More's the pity. But if you can gather your people together, they might not be willing to try you without one of the Faceless to goad them. I would estimate about 100 to begin. A few less now. You have bloodied them some." He began a calm survey of the shadows beneath the trees, only the blade in his hand indicating anything out of the ordinary. For a bare moment, Perrin gaped. Elana wanted him? She had sent Ivan? Just in time to save his life. Shaking himself, he raised his voice again. "Two Rivers to me! For the love of the light, rally to me! Here! Rally here!" This time he kept it up until familiar faces appeared, stumbling through the trees. Blood-streaked faces, often as not. Shocked, staring faces. Some men half-supported others, and some had lost their bows. The Aiel were among them, apparently unhurt, except that Gaul limped slightly. "They did not come as we expected," was all the Aielman said. "The night was colder than we expected. There was more rain than we expected." That was how he said it. Fail seemed to materialize with the horses. With half the horses, including Stepper and Swallow, and 9 of the 12 men he had left with her. A scrape marred one cheek, but she was alive. He tried to hug her, but she pushed his arms away, muttering angrily over the broken-off arrow, even while she gently pulled his coat away from the thick shaft in an effort to examine where it had gone in. Perrin studied the men around him. They had stopped coming now, yet there were faces missing. Kenley Ahan, Billy Aldai, Tevin Marwyn. He made himself name the missing, made himself count them, 27. 27 not there. Did you bring all the wounded? He asked dully. Is anybody left out there? Fail's hand trembled on his side. Her expression as she frowned at his wound was a blend of worry and fury. She had a right to be angry. He should never have gotten her into this. Only the dead, Van Alsine said, in a voice as leaden as his face. Will looked to be frowning at something just out of sight. I saw Kenley, he said. His head was in the crook of an oak, but the rest of him was down at the foot. I saw him. His cold won't bother him now. He sneezed and looked startled. Perrin sighed heavily and wished he had not. Pain shooting up his side clenched his teeth. Fail, a green and gold silk scarf wadded in her hand, was trying to pull his shirt out of his breeches. He pushed her hands away despite her scowl. There was no time for tending wounds now. Wounded on the horses, he said when he could speak. Yvonne, will they attack us? The forest seemed too still. Yvonne! The warder appeared, leading a dark gray gelding with a fierce eye. Perrin repeated his question. Perhaps, perhaps not. On their own, Trollocs kill whomever is easiest. Without a halfman, they would probably rather find a farm than someone who might put arrows in them. Make sure everyone who can stand upright carries a bow with an arrow nocked, even if they cannot draw it. They may decide the price is too high for the fun. Perrin shivered. If the Trollocs did attack, they would have as much fun as a dance at Sunday. Yvonne and the Aiel were the only ones really ready to fight back. And Fail. Her dark eyes shone with fury. He had to get her to safety. The warder did not offer his own horse for the wounded, which made sense. The animal was not likely to let anyone else on its back, and a war-trained horse with its master in the saddle would be a formidable weapon if the Trollocs came again. Perrin tried to put Fail up on Swallow, but she stopped him. The wounded, you said, she told him softly. Remember? To his disgust, she insisted he ride Stepper. He expected the others to protest after he had brought them to disaster, but no one did. There were just enough horses for those who could not walk, and those unable to walk far. Grudgingly, he admitted that he was one of the latter. So he ended up in his saddle. Half the other riders had to cling to theirs. He sat upright, gritting his teeth to do it. Those who walked or stumbled,
hey, Migs, how you doing,
and
bro?
some who rode,
Thanks
clutched
for
their
stopping by.
bows as if they meant salvation. Perrin carried one too, and so did Fail, though he doubted she could even draw a Two Rivers longbow. It was appearance that counted now, a solution that might see them safe. Like Yvonne, alert to surprise, the three Aiel looked unchanged as they glided ahead, spears stuck through the harness and the bow cases on their backs, horn bows in hand and ready. The rest, including himself, were a rag-bag remnant, nothing like the band he had led here, so confident and full of his own pride. Yet illusion worked as well as reality. For the first mile through the tangle, vagrant breezes brought him Trolloc stink, the scent of Trollocs shadowing, stalking. Then the stench slowly faded and vanished as the Trollocs fell behind. Mirage. Fail walked beside Stepper, one hand on Perrin's leg, as though she meant to hold him up. Now and then she looked up at him, smiling encouragingly, but with worry creasing her forehead. He smiled back as best he could, trying to make her think he was all right. 27. He could not stop the names from running through his head. Kali Garin, Jared Adair, Dale Altarin, and Ren Chandin. 27 Two Rivers folk he had killed with his stupidity. 27. They took the most direct route back out of the Waterwood, breaking clear sometime in the afternoon. It was hard to tell exactly how late, with the sky still blanketed in gray and everything blandly shadowed. High grass pasture dotted with trees stretched in front of them, and some scattered sheep and a few farmhouses in the distance. No smoke rose from any of the chimneys. If there was anyone in those houses, something hot would have been cooking in the fireplace. The nearest rising smoke plume looked 5 miles off at least. We should find a farm for the night, Ivan said. Some place under cover in case it rains again. A fire. Food. He looked at the Two Rivers men and added, water and bandages. Perrin only nodded. The water was better than he had, knowing the right thing to do. Old Billy Conger, with his head full of ale, was probably better. He just let Stepper follow Ivan's group.
Anyone got plans for their weekend?
Before they had gone much beyond a mile, a faint thread of music caught Perrin's ear. Fiddles and flutes playing merry tunes. At first he thought he was dreaming, but then the others heard too, exchanging incredulous looks, then relieved grins. Music meant people, and happy people by the sound, someone celebrating. That anyone might have something to celebrate was enough to pick their feet up somewhat. Chapter 41. Among the Tuathalan. A gathering of wagons came in sight, a little off to the south, like small houses on wheels. Tall wooden boxes, painted and lacquered in violent shades of red and blue and green and yellow, all standing in a large, rough circle around a few broad-limbed oak trees. The music came from there. Perrin had heard there were tinkers, traveling people in the Two Rivers, but he had not seen them until now. Hobbled horses cropped the long grass nearby. I will sleep elsewhere, Gall said stiffly when he saw Perrin meant to go to the wagons, and loped away without another word. Bane and Chiad spoke softly yet urgently to Fail. Perrin caught enough to know they were trying to convince her to spend the night with them in some snug thicket, and not with the lost ones. They sounded appalled at the idea of speaking to the Tinkers, much less eating or sleeping with them. Fail's hand tightened on his leg as she refused, quietly, firmly. The two maidens frowned at each other, blue eyes meeting gray, with a deep measure of concern. But before the traveling people's wagons came much closer, they trotted away after Gall. They seemed to have recovered some of their spirits, though. Perrin heard Chiad suggesting they induce Gall to play some game called Maiden's Kiss. They were both laughing as they passed out of his earshot. Men and women were working in the camp, sewing, mending harness, cooking, washing clothes and children, levering a wagon up to replace a wheel. Other children ran playing, or danced to the tunes of half a dozen men playing fiddle or flute. From oldest to youngest, the Tinkers wore clothes even more colorful than their wagons, in eye-wrenching combinations that had to have been chosen blindly. No sane man would have worn anything near those hues, and not many women. As the ragtag party approached the wagons, silence fell, people stopping where they were to watch with worried expressions, women clutching infants and children, running to hide behind adults, peering around a leg or hiding their faces in skirts. A wiry man, gray-haired and short, stepped forward and bowed gravely, hands pressed to his chest. He wore a bright blue high-collared coat and baggy trousers of a green that almost seemed to glow, tucked into knee boots. You are welcome to our fires. Do you know the song? For a moment, trying not to hunch around the arrow in him, Perrin could almost stare. He knew this man, the Mahdi, or seeker of this band. What chance, he wondered. Of all the Tinkers in the world, what chance? It should be folk I know. Coincidences made him uneasy. When the pattern produced coincidence, the wheel seemed to be forcing events. I'm beginning to sound like a bloody Aes Sedai. He could not manage the bow, but he remembered the ritual. Your welcome warms my spirit, Rayan, as your fires warm the flesh. But I do not know the song. Fail and Ivan gave him startled looks, but no more than did the Two Rivers men. Judging by the mutters he heard from Ban and Tell and others, he had just given them something else to talk about. Then we seek still, the wiry man intoned. As it was, so shall it be, if we but remember, seek, and find. Grimacing, he surveyed the bloody faces confronting him, his eyes flinching away from the weapons. The traveling people would not touch anything they considered a weapon. You are welcome to our fires. There will be hot water and bandages and poultices. You know my name, he added, looking at Perrin searchingly. Of course. Your eyes. Rain's wife had come to his side as he spoke, a plump woman, gray-haired but smooth-cheeked, a head taller than her husband. Her red blouse and bright yellow skirt and green-fringed shawl jarred the eye, but she had a motherly manner. Perrin Barra, she said. I thought I knew your face. Is Elias with you? Perrin shook his head. I have not seen him in a long time, Isla. He leads a life of violence, Rain said sadly, as you do. A violent life is stained even if long. Do not try to bring him to the way of the leaf standing here, Rain, Isla said briskly, but not unkindly. He is hurt. They all are. What am I thinking of? Rain muttered. Raising his voice, he called, Come, people, come and help. They are hurt. Come and help. Men and women gathered quickly, murmuring their sympathy as they helped injured men down from their horses, guiding men toward their wagons, carrying them when necessary. Will and a few of the others looked concerned over being separated, but Perrin was not. Violence was the farthest thing from the Tuathawan. They would not raise a hand against anyone, even to defend their own lives. Perrin found he had to accept Ivan's assistance to dismount. Climbing down sent jolts of pain radiating out from his side. Rain, he said, a touch breathless. You shouldn't be out here. We fought Trollocs not 5 miles from this spot. Take your people to Emond's Field. They will be safe there. Rain hesitated, and seemed surprised at it, before shaking his head. Even if I wished to, the people would not want it, Perrin. We try not to camp very close to even the smallest village. And not only because the villagers may falsely accuse us of stealing whatever they have lost, or of trying to convince their children to find the way. Where men have built 10 houses together, there is the potential for violence. Since the breaking, the Tuathawan have known this. Safety lies in our wagons, and in always moving, always seeking the song. A plaintive expression came over his face. Everywhere we hear news of violence, Perrin, not just here in your 2 rivers. There is a feel in the world of change, of destruction. Surely we must find this soon. Else I do not believe it will ever be. You will find the song, Perrin said quietly. Maybe they abhorred violence too much for a Taviran to overcome. Maybe even a Taviran could not fight the way of the leaf. It had seemed attractive to him once, too. I truly hope that you will. What will be, Rain said. All things die in their time, perhaps even the song. Isla put a comforting arm around her husband, though her eyes were as troubled as his. Come, she said, trying to hide her ill ease. We must get you inside. Men will talk if their coats are afire. To Fail, she said, You are quite beautiful, child. Perhaps you should beware of Perrin. I never see him but in the company of beautiful girls. Fail gave Perrin a flat, considering look, then tried to gloss it over quickly.
Hey, CK Girls, how you doing, bro?
Yellow, trimmed in red, with red and yellow spokes and tall red-rimmed wheels.
Hope you're
Red and
doing
yellow
good.
trunks lashed to the outside, standing beside a cook fire in the middle of the camp. But when he put his foot on the first of the wooden steps at the back, his knees gave way. Ivan and Rain more than half carried him inside, followed hurriedly by Fail and Isla. and laid him on the bed.
Oh yeah, that's good to hear, CK.
With just room to get by to the sliding door.
Always happy to hear when everyone's doing good.
It truly was like a little house, even to pale pink curtains at the two small windows on either side. He lay there staring at the ceiling. Here, too, the Tinkers made use of their colors. The ceiling was lacquered sky blue, the high cabinets green and yellow. Fail unfastened his belt and took away his
started a little earlier live.
While Isla rummaged in one of the cabinets.
Since I'm house sitting at my mom's right now. Well, house sitting / dog sitting.
Anyone can be surprised, Ivan said. Learn from it, but do not take it too much to heart. Not even Otter Hawkwing won every battle. Otter Hawkwing. Perrin tried to laugh, but it turned into a groan. Yes, he managed. I am certainly not Otter Hawkwing, am I? Isla frowned at the warder, or at his sword, rather. She seemed to find that even worse than Perrin's axe, and came to the bed with a wad of folded bandages. Once she had pulled Perrin's shirt away from the arrow stub, she winced. I do not think I am competent to remove this. It is bedded deep. Barbed, Ivan said in a conversational tone. Trollocs do not use bows very often, but when they do, the arrows are barbed. Out! The plump woman said.
Oh yeah, appreciate it, CK.
And you as well, Rain. Tending the sick is no business of men. Why don't you go see if Moshe has that wheel on his wagon yet? A good idea, Rain said. We may want to move tomorrow. There has been hard traveling this last year.
Yeah, this one's Chloe. One of my mom's dogs.
Then back again to Giladan. Then up into Andor. Tomorrow, I think. When the red door shut behind him and Ivan, Isla turned to Fail worriedly. If it is barbed, I do not think I can remove it at all. I will try if I must. But if there is anyone nearby who knows more of such things... There is someone in Emmons Field, Fail assured her. But is it safe to leave it in him until tomorrow? Safer than me cutting, perhaps. I can mix something for him to drink for the pain, and blend a poultice against infection. Glaring at the two women, Perrin said, Hello. You remember me? I am right here. Stop trying to talk over my head. They looked at him for a moment. Keep him still, Isla told Fail. It is all right to let him talk, but do not allow him to move about. He may injure himself more. I will see to it, Fail replied. Perrin gritted his teeth and did his best to help him get his coat and shirt off, but they had to do most of the work. He felt as weak as the worst wrought iron, ready to bend to any pressure. 4 inches of thumb-thick arrow stuck out almost atop his last rib, rising from a puckered gash, thick with dried blood. They pushed his head down on a pillow, for some reason not wanting him to look at it. Fail washed the wound while Isla prepared her salve with a stone mortar and pestle. Plain, smooth gray stone, the first things he had seen in the Tinker camp that were not brightly colored. They mounded the salve around the arrow and wrapped him with bandages to hold it. Rain and I will sleep beneath the wagon tonight, the Tuathalan woman said at last, wiping her hands. Frowning at the arrow stub sticking up from his bandages,
this week for my brother's gonna suck. Because it's supposed to be getting that into the listen.
He was a gentle
We're gonna start getting into triple digits this week now.
The way of the leaf is not for everyone, Fail said gently. But Isla shook her head again.
It
is for everyone, she replied, just as gently, and a touch sadly. If they only knew it.
It's not going too bad.
She left then, and Fail sat on the edge of the bed, blotting his face with a folded cloth. He seemed to be sweating a great deal for some reason. I blundered.
How's your day going?
He said after a time. No, that is too soft.
I thought I was something.
I don't know the right word.
No, I am.
You did not blunder, she said firmly. You did what seemed fitting at the time. It was
I'll be
fitting.
doing good.
I cannot imagine how they got behind us. Gaul is not one to make a mistake about where his enemies are. Ivan was right, Perrin. Anyone can find circumstances that have changed when he did
Hell
not
yeah,
know.
appreciate it.
You held everyone together.
I always appreciate
You
if
brought us
someone
out.
comes by and shows support.
He shook his head hard and made his side hurt worse. Ivan brought us out.
You know, Mr. Tickles,
What
let me
I
go
did
ahead
was
and
get 27
give
men
you a
killed,
rest, bro.
he said bitterly, trying to sit up to face her.
Oh, wrong way.
Some of them were my friends, Fail. And I got them killed. Fail threw her weight on his shoulders to push him back down. It was a measure of his weakness how easily she held him. There will be time enough for that in the morning, she said firmly, peering down into his face. And we have to put you back on your horse. Ivan did not bring us out. I do not think he cared particularly if anyone but you and he did get out. Those men would have scattered in every direction if not for you, and then we'd all have been hunted down. They would not have held together for Ivan, a stranger. As for your friends, sighing, she sat back down. My father says a general can prepare the living or weep for the dead. I cannot do both. I'm not a general, Fail. I'm a fool of a blacksmith.
I
who thought he
appreciate
could
you
use other
too,
people to
Mr.
help
T.
him get justice, or maybe revenge. I still want it,
Put
but I
that
don't
up
want to
for a
use
second,
anyone else
yo,
for it any
bro.
longer. Do you think the Trollocs will go away because pure enough?
Give me one sec.
The heat in her
No, I'm
voice
smoking on
raised his
some,
hand, but she pushed it
purple
back to the pillow
Trainwreck.
almost roughly. Are they any less vile?
It's really
Do
good.
you need a purer reason to fight
really
them
good
than what
indica.
they are? Another thing my father says. The worst sin a general can commit, worse than blundering, worse than losing, worse than anything, is to desert the men who depend on him. A tap came at the door, and a slender, handsome tinker in a red and green striped coat put his head in. He flashed a smile at Fail, light teeth and oozing charm, before looking at Perrin. Grandfather said it was you. I thought where Egwene said she came from. He frowned suddenly, disapproving.
Yeah, Gorilla Glue's pretty good too.
Your eyes. I see you have followed Elias after all to run with the wolves. I was sure you would never find the way of the
I think a couple days ago, me and my brother smoked
Perrin knew him.
that pre-roll, some Gorilla Glue that we got from your local dispensary from town, in
He
town.
smiled like Will. Go away, Aram. I'm tired. Is Egwene with you? Egwene would twice a die now, Aram, he growled. And she would rip your heart out with the one power if you asked her to dance. Go away. Aram blinked and hastily shut the door, with himself outside. Perrin let his head fall.
I was doing
He
some
smiles too much. He muttered.
gaming earlier
I
today.
cannot abide a man who smiles too much.
Might have to get on some more,
Fail made a choking
Eh,
noise.
maybe a little tonight, maybe get back on
She
some
was
more
biting her
tomorrow.
underlip.
I've been playing
I have something in my throat.
Diablo
she said
4
in
a lot.
strangled voice, getting up hastily. She hurried to the wide shelf below the foot of the bed where Isla had prepared her poultice and stood with her back to him, pouring water from a green and red pitcher into a blue mug.
Or should I
Would
say,
you
once
like
I
something
was
to drink too? Isla left this powder.
able to play,
It will help you sleep.
I was trying earlier today, and
I don't want any powder.
it kept crashing on me.
Fail. Who is your father?
Hell yeah, that's
Her back was
appreciated,
very
bro.
stiff.
Yeah, I hit you up too and rung your bell on yours, Mr. Tickles.
And an unreadable look in her tilted eyes. A minute passed before she said,
I usually
"My
play
father is
a lot of Diablo or
Lord of Bashir,
Assassin's
Tyr,
Creed
and
or
Sedona, Guardian of
UFC.
the White Border, Defender of the Heartland,
But
Marshal
lately I've
General
been
to Queen Tenobia of
at
Saldania.
least trying to grind a little bit on Diablo 4.
White. What was all that about him being a wood merchant or a fur dealer? I seem to remember him dealing in ice
Hell yeah,
once,
Mr.
too.
Tickles. Definitely appreciate it, brother.
It was not a lie.
Definitely
she said
appreciate it.
sharply. Then in a weaker voice,
It all
Just
helps.
not the whole truth. My father's estates do produce lumber and fine woods,
I know
and ice
when I
peppers
do
and
these
furs
lives,
and
it's
more
not
besides.
exactly
and his stewards sell them for him. So he does trade in them.
as I said, I'm not exactly as talkative
Why
as
couldn't
I
you
should
just tell
be.
me? Hiding things.
Hey, most
Lying.
hated, how you doing, brother?
You're a lady.
But I
He
mainly
frowned
do
at her
this
accusingly.
just to
He had not
listen to a
expected
book,
this.
chill, and smoke.
A small merchant for a father, a former
What are you
soldier,
up to,
maybe,
most
but not
hated?
this. Light, what are you doing running around as a hunter of the horn? Don't tell me the Lord of Bashir and all that just sent you off to find adventure.
Uh-huh.
Still holding the cup, she came
For
back
me,
to sit
it's
beside him.
10,
For some reason,
16.
she seemed very intent on his face. My 2 older brothers died, Baron. One fighting Trollocs, the other in a fall
Oh,
from his
yeah.
horse hunting. That made me the eldest.
What you smoking on,
And
most
it meant
hated?
I had to study account books and trading. While my younger brothers learned to be soldiers, while they were being readied for adventures, I had to learn how to manage the estates. It is the eldest's duty. Duty. It is dull, drying, and boring. Buried in paper and clerks.
Mhm.
When Father took Maiden with him to the Blight border, he's 2 years younger than I.
I
That was
figured
more than
you'd
I
be
could
hitting your pen, too.
Girls are not
That's
taught
actually
the
a pretty
sword
tasty
or
one.
war in Sardinia. But Father had named an old soldier from his first command as my footman. And Aaron was always more than happy to teach me to use knives and fight with my hands. I think it amused him. In any case, when Father took Maiden with him, the news had arrived calling the great hunt of the Horn. So I left. I wrote Mother a letter explaining, and I left. And I reached Ilion in time to take the oath of a hunter. Picking up the cloth, she patted at the sweat on his face. You really should sleep if you can. I suppose you
Most
are the
hated.
Lady
You know what we
Bashir,
forgot
some
to
such, he said.
watch before I
I'd
came over
never
here?
come to like a common blacksmith. The word is love, Perrin Ibarra. The firmness of her voice was at sharp odds with the gentle way that the cloth moved on his face. And you are not such a common blacksmith, I think. The cloth paused. Perrin, what did that fellow mean about running with wolves? Rain mentioned this Elias too. For a moment he was frozen, unbreathing. Yet he had just berated her for keeping secrets from him. It was what he got for being hasty and angry. Swing a hammer in haste, and you usually hit your own thumb. He exhaled slowly and told her how he had met Elias Machira and learned he could talk to wolves.
I completely
How his
spaced it
eyes
out,
had changed
too.
color, grown sharper, and his hearing and his sense of smell like a wolf's. About the wolf dream, about what would happen to him if he ever lost his hold on humanity. It's so easy. Sometimes, especially in the dream, I forget I'm a man, not a wolf. If one of these times I don't remember quickly enough, if I lose hold, I'll be a wolf. In my head, at least. A sort of half-wrong image of a wolf. There won't be anything of me left.
What are you going to be doing
He
tomorrow,
stopped,
most hated?
waiting for her to flinch, to move away. If your ears are really that sharp, she said calmly, I will have to watch what I say close to you. He caught her hand to stop her patting. Did you hear anything I said? What will your father and mother think by you? A half-wolf blacksmith. You're a lady, Light. I heard every word. Father will approve. He has always said our family blood is growing too soft.
I said, what are you doing tomorrow?
I know he thinks I am terribly soft. She gave him a smile, fierce enough for any wolf. Of course, Mother always wanted me to marry a king who splits Trollocs in two with one stroke of his sword. I suppose your axe will suffice, but could you tell her you are the king of the wolves? I don't think anyone will come forward to dispute your claim to that throne. In truth, the splitting of Trollocs will probably do for Mother, but I truly think she would like the other. Light, he said hoarsely. She sounded almost serious. No, she did sound serious. If she was even half serious, he was not sure the Trollocs might not be better than meeting her parents. Here, she said, holding the mug of water to his lips. You sound as though your throat is dry. Swallowing, He spluttered at the bitter taste. She had stirred in Isla's powder. He tried to stop, but she filled his mouth, and it was a matter of swallow or choke. By the time he could push the mug away, she had emptied half of it into him. Why did medicine always taste so vile? He suspected women did it on purpose. He would have bet that whatever they took for themselves did not taste that way. I told you I did not want any of that. Gah! Did you? I must not have heard. But whether you did or not, you need sleep. She stroked his curly hair. Sleep, my parent. He tried to tell her he had indeed told her so, and she had heard it. But the words seemed to tangle around his tongue. His eyes wanted to slide shut. In fact, he could not keep them open. The last thing he heard was her soft murmurs. Sleep, my wolf king. Sleep. Chapter 42. A Missing Leaf. Perrin stood near the Tuathwan wagons under bright sunlight, alone, and there was no arrow in his side, no pain.
All the
Among
dogs
the wagons,
and
firewood was
the
stacked,
cat's
ready
all
to be
passed
lifted
out
off
right
iron
now.
pots, hanging from tripods, and clothes hung from wash lines. There were no people or horses. He wore neither coat nor shirt, but a blacksmith's long leather vest that left his arms bare. It could have been any dream, perhaps, except that he was aware it was a dream. And he knew the feel of the wolf dream, the reality and solidity of it, from the long grass around his boots to the breeze out of the west that ruffled his curly hair, to the scattered ash and hemlock. The tinker's gaudy wagons did not seem real, though. They had an air of insubstantiality, a feel that they might shimmer and be gone any moment. They never remained long in one place, tinkers. No soil held them. Wondering how much the land held him, he rested a hand on his axe and looked down in surprise. The heavy blacksmith's hammer hung in the loop on his belt, not the axe. He frowned. Once he would have chosen that way, had even thought he had, but surely no more. The axe. He had chosen the axe. Hammerhead suddenly became half-moon blade and thick spike, flickered back to stout cylinder of cold steel, fluttered between. Finally it stopped, as his axe, and he exhaled slowly. That had never happened before. Here he could change things as he wanted with ease, things about himself at least. And I want the axe, he said firmly. The axe. Looking around, he could just see a farmhouse to the south and deer browsing the barley field, surrounded by a rough stone wall. There was no feel of wolves, and he did not call Hopper. The wolf might or might not come, or even hear, but Slayer could well be out there somewhere. A bristling quiver abruptly tugged at his belt opposite the axe, and he had a stout longbow in his hand with a broadhead arrow nocked. A long leather bracer covered his left forearm. Nothing moved except those deer. Not likely I'll wake soon, he muttered to himself. Whatever that stuff was that Fail had fed him, it had taken him right off. He remembered it as clearly as if he had watched over her shoulder. Fed it to me like I was a babe, he growled. Women. He took one of those long strides, the land blurred around him, and stepped into the farmyard. 2 or 3 chickens scattered, running as if they had already gone feral. The rock-walled sheepfold stood empty, and both thatched-roofed barns were barred shut. Despite curtains still at the windows, the 2-story farmhouse had the look of emptiness. If this was a true reflection of the waking world, and the wolf dream usually was, in an odd way, the people here had been gone for
Hey,
days.
Basti, how you doing, bro?
He was right. His warning was still the places
Good
he
to
had gone.
see you.
He murmured wonderingly. Daughter of a lord.
Not much, just
a lord.
chilling,
3
smoking, and
times a lord. A general and uncle to a queen.
house sitting for my mom.
Right, that makes her a queen's cousin.
Well, house and dog
The
sitting.
simple blacksmith. Women were wonders
See,
strange. Seeking to see how far the word had spread, he zigzagged more than halfway to Devon Ride. A mile or so at a stride, doubling back and crisscrossing his own path. Most farms he saw had that same emptiness. Less than 1 in 5 showed signs of habitation, doors open and windows up, wash hung out on a line, dolls or hoops or carved wooden horses lying around a doorstep. The toys especially made his stomach clench. Even if they had not believed his warning, surely there were enough burned farms about to tell them the same. Tumbled heaps of charred timbers, soot-black chimneys like stark dead fingers. Bending to replace a doll with a smiling glass face and a flower-embroidered dress, some woman had loved her daughter to do all that tiny needlework. He blinked. The same doll still sat on the fieldstone steps where he had picked it up. As he reached out, the one in his hand faded and vanished. Flashes of black in the sky showed his amazement.
Massive.
Ravens, 20 or 30 together, winging toward the westward, toward the mountains of mist, where he had first seen Slayer. He watched coldly while the ravens dwindled to black specks and disappeared. Then he set off after them. Long racing strides carried him 5 miles each, the land a blur except in the moment between one step and the next, into the thick-treed, rocky westwood, across the scrub-covered sandhills, into the cloud-capped mountains, where fir and pine and leatherleaf forested valleys and slopes, to the very valley where he had first seen the man Hopper called Slayer, to the mountainside where he had returned from Tyr. The waygate stood there, closed. The Avendasora leaf seemingly just one among a myriad of intricately carved leaves and vines. Scattered trees, wizened and wind-sculpted, dotted the sparse soil along the glazed stone, where Manetheren had been burned away. Sunlight sparkled on the waters of the Manetheren Drell below. A faint wind up the valley brought him the scent of deer, rabbits, foxes. Nothing moved that he could see. On the point of leaving, he stopped. The Avendasora leaf. One leaf. Loyal had locked the waygate by placing both leaves on this side. He turned, and his hackles rose. The waygate stood open, twin masses of living greenery stirring in the breeze, exposing the dull, silvery surface. His reflection shimmered in it. How? He wondered. Loyal locked the bloody thing. Unaware of crossing the distance, suddenly he was right at the waygate. There was no trefoil leaf among the verdant tangle on the inside of the 2 gates. Strange to think that at that moment in the waking world, someone or something was passing through where he stood. Touching the dull surface, he grunted. It might as well have been a mirror. His hand slid across it as across the smoothest glass. From the corner of his eye, he caught the Avendasora leaf suddenly in its place on the inside, and leaped back just as the waygate began swinging shut. Someone or something had come out or gone in. Out. It has to be out. He wanted to doubt that it was more Trollocs in fades coming into the 2 rivers. The gates merged, became stone carvings again. A sense of being watched was all the warning he had. He jumped, a half-seen image of black streaking through where his chest had been, an arrow. Jumped in one of those world-blurring stretches, landed on a far slope, and jumped again, out of the valley of Manetheren, towering fir, and again. Running, he thought furiously, picturing the valley in his mind, and that brief glimpse of the arrow. It had come from that direction, at that angle when it reached him. So it had to have come from... A final bound took him back onto a slope above Manetheren's grave, crouching among meager, wind-slanted pines, with bow ready to draw. Below him, among the stunted trees and boulders, the arrow had been fired. Slayer had to be down there somewhere. He had to be down... Without thinking, Perrin leaped away, the mountains a smear of gray and brown and green. Almost, he growled. Almost. He had duplicated his mistake in the waterwood, thinking again an enemy would move to suit him, wait where he wanted. This time he ran as hard as he could, only 3 flashing strides to the edge of the sandhills, hoping he had not been seen. This time he circled wide, coming back higher on that same mountainside, up where the air felt thin and cold and the few trees were thick-trunked bushes 50 paces or more apart. Up above where a man might set himself to watch for another who meant to sneak up on the place that arrow had fired. And there his quarry was. 100 paces below, dark-haired and dark-coated, a tall man crouched beside a table-sized granite outcrop, his own half-drawn bow in hand, studying the slope farther down with eager patience. This was the first time Perrin had gotten a good look at him. 100 paces was little distance for his eyes. This slayer's high-collared coat had a borderland cut, and his face looked enough like Land's to be the warder's brother's. He had no brothers, no living kin at all that Perrin knew, and if he had had any, they would not have been here. A borderlander, though, maybe a Shienaran, though his hair was long, not shaved to a top knot, and was held back by a braided leather cord just like Land's. He could not be Malkiri. Land was the last living Malkiri. Wherever he came from, Perrin felt no compunction at all in drawing his bow, broadhead point aimed at Slayer's back. This man had tried to kill him from ambush. A downhill shot could be tricky. Perhaps he had taken too long, or perhaps the fellow felt his cold gaze, but suddenly Slayer became a blur, streaking away east. With a curse, Perrin pursued. 3 strides to the sandhills, another into the westwood. Among the oaks and leatherleaf and underbrush, Slayer seemed to vanish. Halting, Perrin listened. Silence. The squirrels and birds had gone still. He inhaled deeply. A small herd of deer had passed that way not long since, and a faint tinge of something, human but too cold for a man, too emotionless, a scent that tickled his mind with familiarity. Slayer was somewhere close. The air lay as still as the forest, no stir of breeze to tell him which way that scent came. A neat trick, Golden Eyes, locking the way gate. Perrin tensed, ears straining. No telling from where in this dense growth that voice had come. Not so much as a leaf rustled. If you knew how many of the Shadowwrought died trying to get out of the ways there, it would lift your heart. Machin Shin feasted at that gate, Golden Eyes. But not a good enough trick. You saw. The gate is open now. There, off to the right. Perrin slipped through the trees as silently as he had when he had hunted here. It was only a few hundred to begin, Golden Eyes. Just enough to keep those fool white cloaks off balance and see that the renegade died. Slayer's voice became angry. The shadow consume me if that man does not have more luck than the White Tower. Abruptly he chuckled. But you, Golden Eyes, your presence was a surprise. There are those who want your head on a pike. Your precious 2 rivers will be harrowed from end to end now to root you out. What do you say to that, Golden Eyes? Perrin froze close beside the gnarled trunk of a great oak. Why was the man talking so much? Why was he talking at all? He's drawing me right to him. Putting his back against the oak's thick bole, he studied the forest. No movement. Slayer wanted him to come nearer. No doubt into an ambush. And he wanted to find the man and rip his throat out. Yet it could easily be himself who died. And if that happened, no one would know the waygate was open, and Trollocs coming by hundreds, maybe even thousands. He would not play Slayer's game. With a mirthless smile, he stepped out of the wolf dream, telling himself to wake, and Fail twined her arms around his neck and nipped his beard with small white teeth, while Tinker's fiddles sang some wild, heated tune around the campfires. Isla's powder. I can't wake up. Awareness that it was a dream faded. Laughing, he scooped Fail up in his arms and carried her into the shadows, where the grass was soft. Waking was a slow process, rapidly filling his side. Daylight streamed in at the small windows. Bright light. He tried to sit up and fell backward. Fail sprang up from a low stool, her dark eyes lifted. Lie still, she said. You did enough thrashing in your sleep. I have not kept you from rolling over and driving that thing the rest of the way through you. Just to watch you do it now you're awake. Ivan stood leaning against the doorframe, like a dark blade. Help me up, Perrin said. Talking hurt, but so did breathing, and he had to talk. I have to get to the mountains, to the Waygate. She put a hand to his forehead, frowning. No fever, she murmured. Then more strongly, you are going to Emmons Field, where one of the Aes Sedai can heal you. You are not going to kill yourself trying to ride into the mountains with an arrow in you. Do you hear me? If I hear one more word about mountains or Waygates, I will have something that will put you back to sleep, and you will travel on a litter. I am not certain you should not anyway. The Trollocs, Fail. The Waygate is open again. I have to stop them. The woman did not even hesitate before shaking her head. You can do nothing about it, the state you are in. It is Emmons Field for you. But me no buts, Perrin Aybara. Not another word on it. He ground his teeth. The worst was that she was right. If he could not rise from a bed alone, how could he stay in the saddle as far as Manetheren? Emmons Field, he said graciously, but she still sniffed and muttered something about pig-headed. What did she want? I was bloody gracious. Burn her for stubborn. So there will be more Trollocs, Ivan said musingly. He did not ask how Perrin knew. Then he shook his head as if dismissing Trollocs. I will tell the others you are awake. He slipped out, closing the door behind him. Am I the only one who sees the danger? Perrin muttered. I see an arrow in you, Fail said firmly. The reminder gave him a twinge. He just stifled a groan. And she gave a satisfied nod. Satisfied. He wanted to be up and on the way immediately. The sooner he was healed, the sooner he could see to closing the Waygate again. Permanently this time. Fail insisted on feeding him breakfast, a broth thick with mashed vegetables, suitable for a toothless infant, 1 spoon at a time, with pauses to wipe his chin. She would not let him feed himself, and whenever he protested or asked her to go faster, she shoved the words back into his mouth with a spoonful of pap. She would not even let him wash his own face. By the time she got around to brushing his hair and combing his beard, he had settled on dignified silence. You are pretty when you sulk, she said, and pinched his nose. Isla, in green blouse and blue skirt this morning, climbed into the wagon with his coat and shirt, both cleaned and mended. To his irritation, he had to let the 2 women help him don them. He had to let them help him sit up to don them, the coat unbuttoned and the shirt not tucked in, but bunched around the arrow stub. Thank you, Isla, he said, fingering the neat darns. This is fine needlework. It is, she agreed. Fail has a deft touch with a needle. Fail colored, and he grinned, thinking of how fiercely she had told him she would never mend his clothes. A glint in her eye held his tongue. Sometimes silence was the wiser course. Thank you, Fail, he said gravely instead. She blushed even redder. Once they had him on his feet, he reached the door easily enough, but he had to let the 2 women half support him to climb down the wooden steps. At least the horses were saddled, and all the 2 Rivers lads gathered, bows slung on their backs, with clean faces and clothes, and only a few bandages out where they showed. A night with the Tuatha had obviously been good for their spirits, too, even those who still looked as though they could not walk 100 paces. The haggardness that had been in their eyes yesterday was only a shadow now. Will had each arm around a pretty big-eyed tinker girl, of course,
My leg
Van
goes.
Leeuwen, with his nose and a bandage around his head, making his dark hair stand up in a brush, held hands with another, smiling shyly. Most of the others held bowls of thick vegetable stew and spoons, shoveling away. "This is good, Perrin," Daniel said, giving up his empty bowl to a tinker woman. She gestured as if to ask the beanpole fellow whether he wanted more, and he shook his head, but said, "I don't think I could ever get enough of it, do you?" "I had my fill," Perrin told him sourly. Mashed vegetables and broth. "The Tinker girls danced last night," Daniel's cousin Tell said, wide-eyed. "All the unmarried women, and some of them married. You should have seen it, Perrin." "I've seen Tinker women dance before, Tell." Apparently he had not kept his voice clear of what he had felt watching them, for Fail said dryly, "You've seen the Taganza, have you? Someday, if you are good, I may dance the Sassara for you, and show you what a dance really is." Isla gasped in recognition of the name, and Fail went even redder than she had inside. Perrin pursed his lips. If this Sassara set the heart in the Tinker women's swaying, hip-rolling dance, the Taganza, was it? He definitely would like to see Fail dance it. He carefully did not look at her. Rain came, in the same bright green coat, but trousers redder than any red Perrin had ever seen before. The combination made his head ache. "Twice you have visited our fires, Perrin, and for the second time you go without a farewell feast. You must come again soon so we can make up for it." Pushing away from Fail and Isla, he could stand by himself at least. He put a hand on the wiry man's shoulder. "Come with us, Rain. No one in Emmonsfield will harm you. At worst, it's safer than out here with the Trollocs." Rain hesitated, then shook himself, muttering, "I do not know how you can even make me consider such things." Turning, he spoke loudly. "People, Perrin has asked us to come with him to his village, where we will be safe from Trollocs. Who wishes to go?" Shocked faces stared back at him. Some women gathered their children close, and the children hid in their skirts as if the very idea frightened them. "You see, Perrin," Rain said, "for us, safety lies in moving, not in villages. I assure you, we do not spend 2 nights in one place, and we will travel all day before stopping again." "That may not be enough, Rain." The Mahdi shrugged. "Your concern warms me, but we will be safe if the light wills it. The way of the leaf is not only to do no violence," Isla said gently, "but to accept what comes. The leaf falls in its proper time, uncomplaining. The light will keep us safe for our time." Perrin wanted to argue with them, but behind all the warmth and compassion on their faces lay a stony firmness. He thought he would get Bane and Chia to don dresses and give up their spears, or Gaul too, before he made these people budge an inch. Rain shook Perrin's hand, and with that the Tinker woman began hugging the Two Rivers lads, and Ivan too. And the Tinker men began shaking hands, all laughing and saying goodbyes and wishing everyone a safe journey, hoping they would come again. Almost all the men did. Aram stood off to one side, frowning to himself, hands thrust into his coat pockets. The last time Perrin met him, he had seemed to have a sour
One
streak.
second, everyone.
Odd for a tinker. The men did not content themselves with shaking Fail's hand, but hugged her. Perrin kept his face smooth when some of the younger men became overly enthusiastic. Only grinding his teeth a little, he managed to smile. No woman much younger than Isla hugged him. Somehow, even while Fail was letting some skinny, gaudy-coated tinker fold his arms around her and try to squeeze her flat, she stood guard on him like a mastiff. Women without gray in their hair took one look at her face and chose someone else. Meanwhile, Will appeared to be kissing every woman in the camp. So was Ban, and his nose. Even Ivan was enjoying himself, for that matter. He would serve Fail right if one of those fellows cracked a rib for her. Finally, the Tinkers moved back, except for Rain and Isla, opening a space around the Two Rivers folk. The wiry, gray-haired man bowed formally, hands to chest. You came in peace.
Hey, Soy,
Depart
how you
now
doing?
in peace. Always will
Glad you
our
could stop
fires
by.
burn from you. The way of the leaf is peace. Peace be on you always, Perrin replied, and on all the people. Light be it so. I will find the song, or another will find the
Here's the
song.
other little
But
one
the
that
song will be sung this year or in a year to come.
Dog sitting, Glenhouse
He
sitting.
wondered if there had ever been a song, or if the Tuathalan had begun their endless journey seeking something else. Elias had told him they did not know what song, only that they would know it when they found it. Let them find safety, at least that. As it once was, so shall it be again, world without end. World without end, the Tuathalan responded in a solemn murmur. World and time without end. A few final hugs and handshakes were handed round, while Ivan and Fail were helping Perrin up on Stepper. A few last kisses collected by Will, and Ban. And his nose. Others, the badly wounded, were half lifted onto their horses, with Tinkers waving as if to old neighbors off on a long journey. Rain came to shake Perrin's hand. Will you not reconsider? Perrin asked. I remember hearing you say once there was wickedness loose in the world. It's worse now, Rain. And here. Peace be on you, Perrin, Rain replied, smiling. And on you, he said sadly. The Aiel did not appear until they were a mile north of the Tinker camp, Bane and Chiad looking to Fail before trotting ahead to their usual place. Perrin was not sure what they thought might have happened to her among Tuathalan. Gaul moved in beside Stepper, striding easily. The party was not moving very fast, with nearly half the men walking. He glanced at Ivan measuringly, as usual, before turning to Perrin. Your injury is well? His injury hurt like fury. Every step his horse took jolted that arrowhead. I feel fine, he said, not gritting his teeth. Maybe we'll have a dance in Emmons Field tonight. And you? Did you pass a good night playing Maiden's Kiss? Gaul stumbled and nearly fell on his face. What is the matter? Who did you hear suggest this game? The Aielman said quietly, staring straight ahead. Chiad. Why? Chiad, Gaul muttered. The woman is Goshin. Goshin! I should take her back to Hot Springs as Guy Shine. The words sounded angry, but not his odd tone. Chiad. Will you tell me what is the matter? A Myrddraal has less cunning than a woman, Gaul said in a flat voice, and a Trolloc fights with more honor. After a moment he added, in a fierce undertone, and a goat has more sense. Quickening his pace, he ran forward to join the two maidens. He did not speak to them, as far as Perrin could make out, only slowed to walk alongside. Did you understand any of that? Perrin asked Ivan. The warder shook his head. Fail sniffed. If he thinks to make trouble for them, they will hang him by his heels from a branch to cool off. Did you understand it? Perrin asked her. She walked along, neither looking at him nor answering, which he took to mean she did not. I think I might have to find Rain's camp again. It has been a long time since I saw the Taganza. It was interesting. She muttered something under her breath, but he caught it. You could do with hanging by your heels yourself. He smiled down at the top of her head. But I won't have to. You promised to dance this Sasara for me. Her face went crimson. Is it anything close to the Taganza? I mean, there's no point otherwise. You muscle-brained oaf! She snapped, glaring up at him. Men have thrown their hearts and fortunes at the feet of women who dance the Sasara. If Mother suspected I knew it. Her teeth clicked shut as though she had said too much, and her head whipped back to face forward. Scarlet mortification covered her, from her dark hair down to the neck of her dress. "Then there isn't any reason for you to dance it," he said quietly. "My heart and fortune, such as they are, already lie at your feet." Fael missed a step, then laughed softly and pressed her cheek against his booted calf. "You are too clever for me," she murmured. "One day I will dance it for you and boil the blood in your veins." "You already do that," he said, and she laughed again. Pushing her arm behind his stirrup, she hugged his leg to her as she walked. After a while, even the thought of Fael dancing, he extrapolated from the Tinker Dance. It must be something to top that. Could not compete with the pain in his side. Every stride Stepper took was agony. He held himself upright. It seemed to hurt a fraction less that way. Besides, he did not want to spoil the lift the Tuathalan had given everyone's spirits. The other men were sitting up straight in their saddles, too, even those who had been hunched over and clinging the day before. And Ban and Dan'l and the others walked with heads up. He would not be the first to slump. Will began to whistle Coming Home from Tarwin's Gap, and 3 or 4 more. After a time, Ban began to sing in a clear, deep voice. "My home is waiting there for me, and the girl I left behind. Of all the treasure that waits for me, that's what I want to find. Her eyes so merry, and her smile so sweet, her hugs so warm, and her ankle neat. Her kisses hot, now there's a treat. If there's a treasure greater, it lies not in my mind." More joined in on the second verse, until everyone sang, even Ivan. And Fael. Not Perrin, of course. He had been told often enough that he sounded like a stepped-on frog singing. Some even fell into step with the music. "Oh, I have seen stark Tarwin's Gap and the Trollocs' raving horde. I have stood for the Halfman's charge and walked on death's cold board. But a winsome lass, she waits for me, for a dance and a kiss 'neath the apple tree." Perrin shook his head. The day before, they had been ready to run and hide. Today they sang about a battle so long ago that it had left no memory but this song in the 2 rivers.
Chloe.
Perhaps they were becoming soldiers. They would have to, unless he managed to close that waygate. Farms began to appear more often, closer together, until they traveled along hard-packed dirt between fields bordered by hedges or low, rough stone walls. Abandoned farms. No one here clung to the land. They came to the old road, which ran north from the White River, the Manetheren-Drell, through Devon Ride to Emond's Field, and at last began to see sheep in the pastures. Great clumps, like a dozen men's flocks gathered together, with 10 shepherds where there once would have been 1, and half of them grown men. Bow-armed shepherds watched them pass, singing at the top of their lungs, not knowing quite what to make of it. Perrin did not know what to make of his first view of Emond's Field, and neither did the other 2 rivers men, from the way their singing faltered and died. The trees, fences, and hedges closest to the village were simply gone, cleared away. The westernmost houses of Emond's Field had once stood among the trees on the edge of the westwood. The oaks and leatherleaf between the houses remained, but now the forest's brim stood 500 paces away, a long bow shot, and axes rang loud as men pushed it back farther. Row on row of waist-high stakes, driven into the ground at an angle, surrounded the village, a little out from the houses, and presented a continuous hedge of sharpened points, except where the road ran in. At intervals behind the stakes, men stood like sentries, some wearing bits of old armor, or leather shirts sewn with rusty steel discs, a few in dented old steel caps with boar spears, or halberds rooted out of attics, or bush hooks fitted to long poles. Other men, and boys, were up on some of the thatched roofs with bows. They stood when they saw Perrin and the others coming, and shouted to people below. Beside the road, behind the stakes, stood a contraption of wood and thick twisted rope, with a nearby pile of stones bigger than a man's head. Ivan noticed Perrin frowning at it as they came closer. Catapult, the warder said. 6 so far. Your carpenters knew what to do once Tomas and I showed them. The stakes will hold off charging Trollocs or White Cloaks, either one. He might have been discussing the prospects for Moraine. I told you your village was preparing to defend itself.
Give me 1 second, everyone.
Fail sounded fiercely proud, as though it were her village. A hard people for such a soft land. They could almost be Saldean. Moraine always said Manetherin's blood runs strong here still. Perrin could only shake his head. The hard-packed dirt streets were nearly crowded enough for a city. The gaps between houses filled with carts and wagons, and through open doors and unshuttered windows he could see more people. The crowd parted before Ivan and the Aiel, and rustling whispers accompanied them along the street. It's Perrin Goldeneyes! Perrin Goldeneyes! Perrin Goldeneyes! He wished they would not do that. These people knew him, some of them. What did they think they were doing? There was horse-faced Nisa A. Ellen, who had paddled his 10-year-old backside that time Matt talked him into stealing one of her gooseberry pies. And there was pink-cheeked, big-eyed Celia Cole, the first girl he had ever kissed, and still pleasingly plump. And Pelle Dare, with his pipe and his bald head, who had taught Perrin how to catch trout with his hands. And Days Conger herself, a tall, wide woman who made Alsbeth Luhan seem soft, with her husband Wit, a scrawny man overshadowed as always by his wife. And they were all staring at him and whispering to the people from off who might not know who he was. When old Sen Bowie lifted a little boy up on his shoulder, pointing at Perrin and talking enthusiastically to the boy, Perrin groaned. They had all gone mad. Townsfolk trailed after Perrin and the others, around them, in a parade that rode a swell of murmurs. Chickens scurried every which way under people's feet. Bawling calves and pigs squealing in pens behind the houses competed with the noise of the humans. Sheep crowded the green, and black and white milk cows cropped the grass in company with flocks of geese, gray and white. And in the middle of the green rose a tall pole, the red-bordered white banner at its peak, rippling lazily, displaying a red wolf's head. He looked at Fael, but she shook her head, as surprised as he. A symbol. Perrin had not heard Perrin's approach, though now he caught hushed whispers of Aes Sedai floating around her. Ivan did not look surprised. People stared at her with awe-filled eyes. People need symbols, Perrin went on, resting a hand on Stepper's shoulder. When Elana told a few of the villagers how much Trollocs fear wolves, everyone seemed to think this banner a grand idea. Don't you, Perrin? Was there a dryness in her voice then? Her dark eyes looked up at him bird-like. A bird watching a worm. I wonder what Queen Morghese will think of that, Fael said. This is part of Andor. Queens seldom like strange banners being raised in their realms. That's nothing but lines on a map, Perrin told her. It was good to be still. The throbbing from the arrowhead seemed to have abated somewhat. I did not even know we were supposed to be part of Andor until I went to Caemlyn. I doubt many people here do.
It's okay.
Rulers have a tendency to believe maps, Perrin. There was no doubt of the dryness in Fael's tone. When I was a child, there were parts of Saldaea that had not seen a taxman in 5 generations. One's father could turn his attention from the Blight for a time. Tenobia made sure they knew who their queen was. This is the 2 rivers, he said, grinning, not Saldaea. They did sound very fierce up there in Saldaea. As he turned back to Varen, the grin became a frown. I thought you were hiding who you are. He could not say which was more disturbing. Aes Sedai there in secret, or Aes Sedai in the open.
Get dogs in their kennel.
The Aes Sedai's hand hovered an inch from a broken-off arrow jutting from his side. Something tingled around the wound. Oh, this is not good, she murmured. Caught in the rib and some infection in spite of that poultice. This needs Alana, I think. She blinked and pulled her hand back. The tingle went too. What? Hiding? Oh, with what has been stirred up here now, we could hardly remain hidden. I suppose we could have gone away. You wouldn't want that, would you? There was that sharp, considering, bird-like stare again. He hesitated, and finally sighed. I suppose not. Oh, that is good to hear, she said with a smile. Why did you really come here, Baron? She did not seem to hear him, or did not want to. Now, we need to see to that thing in you, and these other lads need to be looked after too. Alana and I will see to the worst, but the men with him were as stunned by what they found here as he was. Ban scratched his head at the banner, and a few just stared around in amazement. Most looked at Varen, though, wide-eyed and uneasy. They had surely heard the whispers of Aes Sedai. Perrin was not escaping those looks entirely himself, he realized, talking to an Aes Sedai as though she were just any village woman. Varen considered them right back, then suddenly, without seeming to look, reached behind her to snatch a girl of about 10 or 12 out of the onlookers. The girl, her long dark hair caught up with blue ribbons, went rigid with shock. You know Days Conger, girl? Varen said. Well, you find her and tell her there are injured men who need a wisdom's herbs. And tell her to jump. You tell her I'll have no patience with her airs. You have that? Off with you. Perrin did not recognize the girl, but evidently she did know Days, because she flinched at the message. But Varen was an Aes Sedai. After a moment of weighing, Days Conger against an Aes Sedai, the girl scampered away into the crowd. And Alana will take care of you, Varen said, peering up at him again. He wished she did not sound as though there might be two meanings to that. Chapter 43. Care for the Living. Taking Stepper's bridle, Varen led him to the wine spring in herself, the crowd melting back to let her through, then falling in after. Daniel and Ban and the others trailed along on horse and afoot, kin mingling with them now. Astounded as they were by the changes in Emond's Field, the lads still showed their pride by striding, even if they limped, or sitting up straighter in the saddle. They had faced Trollocs and come home. But women ran their hands over sons and nephews and grandsons, often biting back tears, and their low moans made a soft, pained murmur. Tight-eyed men tried to hide their worries behind proud smiles, clapping shoulders and exclaiming over newly begun beards, yet frequently their hugs just happened to turn into a shoulder to lean on. Sweethearts rushed in with kisses and loud cries, equal parts happiness and commiseration. And little brothers and sisters, uncertain, alternated between fits of weeping and clinging in wide-eyed wonder to a brother everyone seemed to be taking for a hero. It was the other voices Perrin wished he could not hear. Where is Kenley? Mistress Ahan was a handsome woman, with streaks of white in her nearly black braid, but she wore a fear-filled frown as she scanned faces and saw eyes flinch from hers. Where's my Kenley? Billy! Old Hugh Aldai called uncertainly. Has anyone seen Billy Aldai? You, Jared, Tim, Collie. In front of the inn, Perrin fell out of the saddle in his need to escape those names, not even seeing whose hands caught him. Get me inside, he grated. Inside. Tevin! Harald! Had! The door cut off the heart-lost wails and the cries of Dale Altaran's mother for someone to tell her where her son was. In a Trolloc cookpot, Perrin thought, as he was lowered into a chair in the common room. In a Trolloc's belly, where I put him, Mistress Altaran. Where I put him. Thail had his head in her hands, peering into his face worriedly. Care for the living, he thought. I'll weep for the dead later. Later. I'm all right, he told her. I just got a little lightheaded dismounting. I've never been a good rider. She did not seem to believe him. Can't you do something? She demanded of Varen. The Aes Sedai calmly shook her head. I think better not, child. A pity neither of us is yellow, but Alana is still a much better healer than I. My talents lie in other directions. Ivan will bring her. Wait with patience, child. The common room had been turned into an armory of sorts. Except in front of the fireplace, the walls were a solid mass of propped spears of every description, with the occasional halberd or bill mixed in, and some pole arms with oddly shaped blades, many pitted and discolored where old rust had been scoured away. Even more surprisingly, a barrel near the foot of the stairs held swords all jumbled together, most without scabbards and no two alike. Every attic within 5 miles must have been turned out for relics dust-covered for generations. Perrin would not have suspected there were 5 swords in the whole 2 rivers. Before the White Cloaks and Trollocs came, anyway. Gaul took a place off to one side, near the stairs that led up to the inn's rooms and the Albeer's living quarters, watching Perrin but plainly aware of Varen and every move she made. On the other side of the room, watching Fail and all else, the 2 maidens cradled their spears in the crook of an elbow and took a hip-shot stance that seemed at once casual and yet balanced on the toes. The 3 young fellows who had carried Perrin in shifted their feet by the door, staring at him and the Aes Sedai and the Aiel with equally wide eyes. That was all. The others, Perrin said, they will be taken care of. Varen interrupted smoothly, seating herself at another table. They will want to be with their families. Much better to have loved ones close. Varen felt a stab of pain. The graves below the apple trees flashed in his mind, but he pushed it down. Take care of the living, he reminded himself harshly. The Aes Sedai brought out her pen and ink and began making notes in that small book in a precise hand. He wondered whether she cared how many Two Rivers folk died, so long as he lived, to be used in the White Tower's plans for Rand. Fail squeezed his hand, but it was to the Aes Sedai that she spoke. Should we not take him up to a bed? Not yet, Perrin told her irritably. Varen looked up and opened her mouth, and he repeated in a firmer voice, Not yet. The Aes Sedai shrugged and went back to her note-taking. Does anyone know where Loyal is? The Ogier, one of the 3 by the door said. Dav Aelin was stockier than Mat, but he had that same flame in his dark eyes. He had the same rumpled, uncombed look about him as Mat, too. In the old days, what little mischief Mat did not get up to, Dav did, though Mat usually led the way. He's out with the men clearing back the Westwood. You'd think we were cutting down his brother every time we cut a tree. But he clears 3 to anybody else's 1 with that monstrous axe he had Master Luhan make. If you want him, I saw J.M. Thane running to tell them you had come in. I'll bet they all come to get a look at you. Peering at the broken-off arrow, he winced and rubbed his own side in sympathy. Does it hurt much? It hurts enough, Perrin said curtly. Coming to get a look at him. What am I, a gleeman? What about Luke? I don't want to see him, but is he here? I'm afraid not. The second man, Elam Doubtry, rubbed his long nose. Incongruous with his farmer's wool coat and his cowlick, he wore a sword at his belt. The hilt had been freshly wrapped in rawhide, and the leather scabbard flaked and peeling. Lord Luke is off hunting the Horn of Valir, I think. Or maybe Trollocs. Dav and Elam were Perrin's friends, or had been, companions in hunting and fishing, both his age near enough, but their thrilled grins made them seem younger. Either Mat or Rand could have passed for 5 years older at least. Maybe he could too. I hope he comes back soon, Elam went on. He has been showing me how to use a sword. Did you know he's a hunter for the Horn? And a king if he had his rights. Of Andor, I hear. Andor as queens, Perrin muttered absently, meeting Fail's gaze. Not kings. So he is not here, she said. Gaul shifted slightly. He looked ready to go hunting for Luke, his eyes blue ice. It would not have surprised Perrin to see Bane and Chiad bail themselves on the spot. No, Varen said vaguely, manifestly more intent on her notes than what she was saying. Not that he hasn't been a help sometimes, but he does have a way of causing trouble when he is here. Yesterday, before anyone knew what he was doing, he led a delegation out to meet a White Cloak patrol and told them Emmons Field was closed to them. He apparently told them not to come within 10 miles. I cannot approve of White Cloaks, but I do not suppose they took that very well. Not wise to antagonize them more than is strictly necessary. Frowning at what she had written, she rubbed her nose, seemingly unaware of leaving a smudge of ink. Perrin did not much care how the White Cloaks took anything. Yesterday, he breathed. If Luke had come back to the village yesterday, it was not likely he could have had anything to do with Trollocs being where they were not expected. The more Perrin thought about how that ambush turned around, the more he thought the Trollocs must have been expecting them. And the more he wanted to blame Luke. Wanting won't make a stone cheese, he muttered. But he still smells like cheese to me. Dav and the other two looked at each other doubtfully. Perrin supposed he must not seem to be making much sense. It was a bunch of Coplans, mainly, the third fellow said, in a startlingly deep voice. Dahl and Hari and Dag and Ewell. And Witconger. Days gave him a fit over it. I heard they all liked the White Cloaks. Perrin thought the bass-voiced fellow seemed familiar. He was younger than Elam and Dav by 2 or 3 years, yet an inch taller, lean-faced, but with wide shoulders. They did, the fellow laughed. You know them. They drift naturally toward anything that makes trouble for somebody else. Since Lord Luke has been talking, they're all for marching up to Watch Hill and telling the White Cloaks to get out of the Two Rivers. Anyway, they're for somebody else marching up there. I think they mean to be well back in the pack. If that face had been pudgy and half a foot or more nearer the ground. Ewan Fingar, Perrin exclaimed. It could not be. Ewan was a stout, squeaky little nuisance who tried to crowd in whenever the older fellows got together. This lad would be as big as he was, or bigger, by the time he stopped growing. Is that you? Elwyn nodded with a broad grin. We've been hearing all about you, Perrin, he said in that surprising bass. Fighting Trollocs and having all kinds of adventures out in the world, so they say. I can still call you Perrin, can't I? Yes, Perrin barked. He was more than tired of this Golden Eyes business. I wish I'd gone with you last year. Dav rubbed his hands together eagerly. Coming home with Aes Sedai and warders and an Ogier. He made them sound like trophies. All I ever do is herd cows and milk cows, herd cows and milk cows. That and hoe and chop wood. You've had all the luck. What was it like? Elam put in breathlessly. Alana Sedai said you've been all the way to the Great Blight. And I hear you've been to Camelin and Tyr. What's a city like? Are they really 10 times as big as Emmons Field? Did you see a palace? Are there dark friends in the cities? Is the Blight really full of Trollocs and Fades and warders? Did a Trolloc give you that scar? Voice like a bull or not, Ewan managed a sort of squeaky excitement. I wish I had a scar. Did you see a queen or a king? I think I'd rather see a queen, but a king would be grand. What is the White Tower like? Is it as big as a palace? Fail smiled, amused, but Perrin blinked at the onslaught. Had they forgotten the Trollocs on winter night? Forgotten the Trollocs in the countryside right then? Elam clutched his sword hilt as if he wanted to be off for the Blight on the instant, and Dav was up on his toes, eyes gleaming, and Ewan looked ready to grab Perrin's collar. Adventure? They were idiots. Yet there were hard times coming, harder than the Two Rivers had seen so far, he was afraid. It could not hurt if they had a little while longer before they learned the truth. His side hurt, but he tried to answer. They seemed disappointed he had never seen the White Tower, or a king or a queen. He thought Berelain might suffice for a queen, but with Fail there, he was not about to mention her. Some other things he shied away from: Falma and the Eye of the World, the Forsaken, Kalendor. Dangerous subjects, those, leading inevitably to the Dragon Reborn. He could tell them a little of Caemlyn, though, and Tyr, of the Borderlands and the Blight. It was odd what they accepted and what not. The corrupted landscape of the Blight, seeming to rot while you looked at it, they ate up, and top-knotted Shienaran soldiers, and Ogier steading where Aes Sedai could not wield the power, and Fades were reluctant to enter. But the size of the Stone of Tyr, or the immensity of cities. About his own supposed adventures, he said, "Mainly, I've just tried to keep from having my head split open. That's what adventures are. That and finding a place to sleep for the night and something to eat. You go hungry a lot having adventures, and sleep cold or wet or both." They did not like that very much, or appear to believe it any more than they believed that the stone was as big as a small mountain. He reminded himself that he had known as little of the world before he left the Two Rivers. It did not help much. He had never been this wide-eyed, had he? The common room seemed to be hot. He would have taken his coat off, but moving seemed too much effort. "What about Rand and Mat?" Eowyn demanded. "If it's all being hungry and getting rained on, why didn't they come home too?" Tam and Abel had come in, Tam with a sword belted on over his coat, and both men with bows. Oddly, the sword looked right on Tam, farm coat or no. So he told it much as he had before, Mat gambling and carousing in taverns and chasing girls, and Rand in his fine coat, with a pretty yellow-haired girl on his arm. He made Elaine a lady, expecting they would never believe the daughter-heir of Ander, and was proved right when they expressed incredulity. Still, it all seemed satisfactory, the kind of thing they wanted to hear, and disbelief faded a bit when Elam pointed out that Fail was a lady, and seemed to be dancing attendance on Perrin pretty sharp. That made Perrin grin. He wondered what they would say if he told them she was cousin to a queen. Fail no longer appeared to be amused for some reason. She turned on them with a stare to match Elaine's haughtiest, stiff-backed and frosty-faced. "You have badgered him enough. He is wounded. Off with you now." For a wonder, they bowed clumsily. Dav made an awkward gesture, looking a complete fool, and murmured hasty apologies to her, not him, and turned to go. Their departure was delayed by the arrival of Loyal, stooping through the doorway with his shaggy hair brushing the transom. They stared at the Ogier almost as if seeing him for the first time, then glanced at Fail and hurried on their way. That cold lady's stare of hers did work. When Loyal straightened, his head came just short of the ceiling. His capacious coat pockets bore the usual squared bulges of books, but he carried a huge axe. Its haft stood as tall as he did, and its head, shaped like a wood axe, was at least as big as Perrin's battle axe. "You are hurt," he boomed, as soon as his eyes fell on Perrin. "They told me you had returned, but they did not say you were hurt, or I would have come faster." The axe gave Perrin a start. Among Ogier, putting a long handle on your axe meant being hasty or angry. Ogier seemed to see the two as much the same thing for some reason. Loyal did look angry, tufted ears drawing back, frowning so his dangling eyebrows hung down on his broad cheeks. At having to cut trees, no doubt. Perrin wanted to get him alone and find out if he had seen anything more concerning Alana's doings. Or Baron's. He rubbed his face and was surprised to find it dry. He felt as if he should be sweating. "He is also stubborn," Fail said, turning on Perrin with the same commanding look she had used on Dav and Elam and Eowyn. "You should be in bed. Where is Alana, Baron? If she is to heal him, where is she?" "She will come." The Aes Sedai did not look up. She was back into her little book again, frowning thoughtfully, pen poised. He should still be in a bed. I will have time for that later, Perrin said firmly. He smiled at her to soften it, but all that did was make her look worried and mutter stubborn under her breath. He could not ask Loyal about the Aes Sedai in front of Baron, but there was something else at least as important. Loyal, the Waygate is unlocked, and Trollocs coming through. How can that be? The Ogier's brows sank even deeper, and his ears wilted.
My fault, Perrin,
He rumbled mournfully.
I put both Avendesora leaves on the outside. That locked the Waygate on the inside, but from the outside anyone could still open it. The ways have been dark for long generations, yet we grew them. I could not bring myself to destroy the gate. I am sorry, Perrin. It is all my fault.
I did not believe a Waygate could be destroyed, Fail said.
I did not mean destroy exactly.
Loyal leaned on his long-handled axe.
A Waygate was destroyed once, less than 500 years after the breaking, according to Damel, daughter of Allah, daughter of Sofera, because the gate was near a steading that had fallen to the Blight. There are 2 or 3 gates lost in the Blight as it is. But she wrote that it was very difficult and required 13 Aes Sedai working together with a sa'angreal. Another attempt she wrote of, by only 9 during the Trolloc Wars, damaged the gate in such a way that the Aes Sedai were pulled into.
He cut off, ears wriggling with embarrassment, and knuckled his wide nose. Everyone was staring at him, even Baron and the Aiel.
I do let myself be carried away sometimes. The Waygate. Yes, I cannot destroy it, but if I remove both Avendesora leaves completely, they will die.
He grimaced at the thought.
The only means of opening the gate again will be for the elders to bring the Talisman of Growing, though I suppose an Aes Sedai could cut a hole in it.
This time he shuddered. Damaging a Waygate must have seemed like tearing up a book to him. A moment later, he was grim-faced once more.
I will go now.
No, Perrin said sharply. The arrowhead seemed to throb, but it did not really hurt anymore. He was talking too much. His throat was dry. There are Trollocs up there, Loyal. They can fit an Ogier into a cook pot as well as a human.
But Perrin,
No, Loyal. How are you going to write your book if you go off and get yourself killed? Loyal's ears twitched.
It is my responsibility, Perrin.
The responsibility is mine, Perrin said gently. You told me what you were doing with the Waygate, and I didn't suggest anything different. Besides, the way you jump every time your mother is mentioned, I don't want her coming after me. I will go as soon as Alanna heals this arrow out of me. He wiped his forehead, then frowned at his hand. Still no sweat. Can I have a drink of water? Fail was there in an instant, her cool fingers where his hand had been. He is burning up. Varen, we cannot wait for Alanna. You must... I am here, the dark Aes Sedai announced, appearing from the door at the back of the common room. Mara Nalvir and Alsbeth Luhan at her heels, and Ivan right behind them. Varen felt the tingle of the power before Alanna's hand replaced Fael's, and she added in a cool, serene voice, "Carry him into the kitchen. The table there is large enough to lay him out. Quickly, there is not much time." Perrin's head spun, and abruptly he realized Loyal had leaned his axe beside the door and picked him up, cradling him in his arms. The Waygate is mine, Loyal. Light, I'm thirsty. My responsibility. The arrowhead truly did not seem to hurt as much as it had, but he ached all over. Loyal was carrying him somewhere, bending through doorways. There was Mistress Luhan, biting her lip, eyes squinched as if about to cry. He wondered why. She never cried. Mistress Alvier looked worried too. "Mistress Luhan," he murmured. "Mother says I can come and be apprenticed to Master Luhan." No, that was a long time ago. That was... what was? could not seem to remember. He was lying on something hard, listening to Alana speak. Barbs are caught on bone as well as flesh, and the arrowhead is twisted. I must realign it with the first wound and pull it out. If the shock does not kill him, I can then heal the damage I have done as well as the rest. There is no other way. He is near the brink now. Nothing to do with him. Fail smiled down at him nervously, her face upside down. Had he really once thought her mouth was too wide? It was just right. He wanted to touch her cheek, but Mistress Alvear and Mistress Luhan were holding his wrists for some reason, leaning with all their weight. Someone was lying across his legs, too, and Loyal's big hands swallowed his shoulders, pressing them flat to the table. Table. Yes, the kitchen table. Bite down, my heart, Fail said from far away. It will hurt. He wanted to ask her what would hurt, but she was pressing a leather-wrapped stick into his mouth. He smelled the leather and the spicewood and her. Would she come hunting with him, running across the endless grassy plains after endless herds of deer? Icy cold shivered through him. Vaguely he recognized the feel of the one power. And then there was pain. He heard the stick snap between his teeth before blackness covered everything. Chapter 44. Perrin opened his eyes slowly, staring up at the plain white plastered ceiling. It took a moment to realize he was in a four-posted bed, lying on a feather mattress with a blanket over him and a goose-down pillow under his... Goose-down pillow under...
Alright, I'm probably going to call it Into This Life for right now. Probably be on again tomorrow and either a gaming live or another live like this, but definitely appreciate all y'all that keep stopping by and chilling with me. But definitely appreciate all y'all's love and support. Till next time, everyone, y'all stay safe out there.